Welcome back to another English lesson. Some sad news out of our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. It appears that a small plane crashed into a Black Hawk helicopter. This only happened a few hours ago, so all of the details are not clear yet. But in this English lesson, we will watch a news clip. Of course, they will use advanced vocabulary, English idioms, some pesky English phrasal verbs, and then I will come back and teach those difficult terms. In this English lesson, you will learn terms like tragedy. We will use fear as a verb. We'll talk about a collision and we'll use the verb collide. We will talk about Reagan National Airport. We will also talk about the man who the airport is named after. We'll talk about the Potomac River. Do you know what a dozen is? If you don't now, you will by the end of this English lesson. We will talk about the difference between search and rescue and search and recovery in English. Do you know the word frigid? We'll talk about the adjective grim. We will talk about the city, Wichita, Kansas. Do you know what it means if somebody takes the lead? You will learn all of that and more. Before we take a look at the news clip, could you please hit that like button? It will tell YouTube that they should show this English lesson to other English learners. And if this is your first time here, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss another English lesson.
Tragedy in the nation's capital. Dozens are feared dead after a mid-air collision right near Reagan National Airport.
We want to show you some live pictures from the scene this morning. Investigators are saying an American Airlines regional jet collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter, with both aircraft ending up in the Potomac River. This happened just before 9 last night.
They mentioned the word tragedy in the news clip, and for each of those difficult terms, I will have a picture. I will use that term in a sentence, and then I will have the official definition. Let's look at tragedy first. It is a very sad event, often involving death or suffering. The collision between the airplane and the helicopter was a tragedy that affected many families. As I record this now, it seems there are no survivors. Nobody lived through the collision. So tragedy is the noun, but the adjective is tragic. And it's pretty much the same thing as tragedy. You can see sadness and sorrow. Let's use tragic in a sentence. The tragic accident led to a nationwide mourning. Notice the way mourning is spelled in that sentence. We are not talking about the beginning of the day. We are talking about the sadness you feel after somebody has died. You might know fear as an emotion, as a noun, but we are going to talk about it as a verb. You might hear the term feared the worst. And to fear means to be afraid that something bad might have happened. Many people feared that there were no survivors after the crash. A little later in the news clip, you will meet a man who fears his wife was on that plane. It is super sad. I can't believe reporters found him and were able to interview him. He seemed so alone.
Tragedy in the nation's capital. Dozens are feared dead after a mid-air collision right near Reagan National Airport.
We want to show you some live pictures from the scene this morning. Investigators are saying an American Airlines regional jet collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter, with both aircraft ending up in the Potomac River. This happened just before 9 last night as that airliner was coming into land. News 6's Mark Lehman's been following the overnight updates. Mark, there are reports more than a dozen bodies have been pulled out of the water.
I have used this word collision already. Let's get the official definition. It's when two objects hit each other with force. And if you take a look at that picture, there was a collision between those two cars. But that's not what happened in Washington, D.C. Let's take a look at this sentence. The collision between the jet and the helicopter occurred over the Potomac River. Don't worry, we will talk about that river in just a minute. Collision is the noun. You can have a collision, but the verb is collide, and it means to crash into each other. The two aircraft collided in midair near the airport, and we will talk about what aircraft means a little later.
A tragedy in the nation's capital. Dozens are feared dead after a mid-air collision right near Reagan National Airport.
This tragic event happened just outside Reagan National Airport. And Reagan National Airport is a major airport located in Washington, D.C., our capital. The flight was approaching Reagan National Airport when the accident happened. Well, where did that airport get its name? It got its name from this guy, Ronald Reagan, the 40th president of the United States, after whom the airport is named. Ronald Reagan served as president from 1981 to 1989.
We want to show you some live pictures from the scene this morning. Investigators are saying an American Airlines regional jet collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter, with both aircraft ending up in the Potomac River. This happened just before 9 last night as that airliner was coming into land. News 6's Mark Lehman's been following the overnight updates. Mark, there are reports more than a dozen bodies have been pulled out of the water.
Yeah, a police official at the scene told CBS News that at least 18 bodies were recovered.
In the news report, they used the term investigators. Let's talk about what investigators are. They are people who examine events to find out what happened. You might see investigators at a crime scene. They are trying to figure out what happened. They are trying to answer all of the questions about that crime. Let's use investigators in a sentence. Investigators are looking into the cause of the crash. Let's talk about what a regional jet is. So you might hear airplane, plane, or jet. They all pretty much mean the same thing. Sometimes I think jets might be a little quicker than planes, but not always. But a regional jet is a small airplane used for short distant flights. The regional jet was flying from Wichita, that's a funny city to say, Wichita to Washington, D.C. So you wouldn't take a regional jet from Washington, D.C. to Paris. That is too long of a flight. You have to fly over the Atlantic Ocean. You need to take a bigger plane to fly such a long distance. Or you could say a bigger jet. And it did collide with a Black Hawk helicopter. In the picture, Black Hawk is one word, but I think it is actually two words, like right down there. A Black Hawk helicopter is a type of military helicopter used by the U.S. Army. The Black Hawk helicopter was on a training mission when the accident occurred. And helicopters don't have wings. Right at the top of the helicopter, we would call those things blades. And aircraft, that's just pretty much airplanes, helicopters, anything that flies. But let's get the official definition. Any vehicle that can fly, such as airplanes and helicopters. Both aircraft were severely damaged in the incident. And this tragic accident happened over the Potomac River. The Potomac River is a river that flows through Washington, D.C. The wreckage fell into the Potomac River after the collision.
Mark, There are reports more than a dozen bodies have been pulled out of the water.
Yeah, police official at the scene told CBS News that at least 18 bodies were recovered. Both aircraft were transporting a total of 67 people at the time of impact. And right now, a massive search and rescue effort is ongoing.
I know I have talked about dozen on this channel before, so maybe this is review, but a dozen is a group of 12. Rescue teams recovered over 2 dozen bodies from the river. Super, super sad. I am sure there will be more than 2 times 12. 24 bodies. I think the final count will be more like 60 or 70. It doesn't look like anyone survived the crash. AI created this picture. I don't think there are quite 12 donuts there or eggs, but in the United States, you can buy eggs by the dozen and you can buy donuts by the dozen. I don't suggest you eat 12 donuts at one time, but hey, you do you. I am not a doctor. I am only an English teacher. Recovered. Recovered means to find and bring back something lost, especially a body after an accident. Divers recovered several bodies from the crash site. Keep that word recovered in mind because in a little bit, we will change that to recovery.
Yeah, police official at the scene told CBS News that at least 18 bodies were recovered. Both aircraft were transporting a total of 67 people at the time of impact.
They also used impact in the news clip. I thought that might be new for you. It is the action of one object hitting another. And I used the same picture that we used for collision because collision and impact are pretty much the same thing. The impact of the collision caused both aircraft to crash.
And right now, a massive search and rescue effort is ongoing. Earthcam video shows the moment a passenger jet and an Army helicopter collided in midair. It was just before 9 last night near Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport.
I am sure you know the word big in English. Massive is pretty much a synonym. It means almost the same thing. Here is the official definition: very large in size or amount. In that picture, you can see a massive iceberg. Yeah, we would call that thing in the picture an iceberg. Here is a sentence using massive. There was a massive response from emergency services after the accident. If you watch the news after tragedies, you might hear these terms: search and rescue and search and recovery. They are not the same thing. Search and rescue means operations to find and help people in danger. So if there is a search and rescue mission going on, they are hoping to find people still alive. Search and rescue teams worked through the night to find survivors. Survivors are people who lived. If you look at this picture, it looks like an earthquake has occurred. People are looking through the rubble to find survivors. You can see there is a rescue dog there sniffing around, smelling to see if people are still alive. But search and recovery is very different. They are now using big machines because they don't think anyone survived. Here, they still have to be careful just in case people are still alive under all the debris. Let's get a definition for search and recovery. Operations to find and retrieve bodies after an accident. They're not looking for survivors. After determining there were no survivors, the mission shifted to search and recovery. They can work a little more quickly if it's search and recovery. They don't have to be as careful. It's very sad when it changes from search and rescue to search and recovery. My heart really goes out to all of those family members who lost somebody. But in the news clip, they talked about the approach of the airplane, let's get the official definition. The path an aircraft follows when coming into land. And that piece of land that an airplane lands on is something we call the runway. Let's use it in a sentence. The jet was on its final approach to the airport when the collision happened.
Earthcam video shows the moment a passenger jet and an Army helicopter collided in midair. It was just before 9 last night near Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport.
Accident happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river. It's east of the approach end of runway 330.
The crash triggering a frantic search in the frigid waters of the Potomac River. The effort growing more grim by the hour.
Frantic. I'm sure there were many family members who were frantic after hearing the news. It means done in a hurried and anxious way. The man in the picture definitely looks frantic. Families made frantic calls seeking information about their loved ones. Maybe you are late for work, you can't find your cell phone. Maybe you do a frantic search looking for your cell phone. We talked about massive earlier, which is another way to say big. Let's talk about another way to say cold, and that is frigid. Frigid. It simply means very cold. Rescue operations were challenging due to the frigid water temperatures. Yeah, a huge shout out to those people who risked their life to recover those bodies in the Potomac River.
The crash triggering a frantic search in the frigid waters of the Potomac River. The effort growing more grim by the hour.
They use the term grim, and I'm going to add task, a grim task. It means a very sad and serious job. Recovering bodies from the crash site was a grim task for the responders. And if you don't know what responders are, don't worry, we will talk about them in just a minute.
So it's a highly complex operation. The conditions out there are extremely rough for the responders.
American Airlines says PSA operated Flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas was trying to land at the time. 64 people were on board. A man told a local CBS affiliate he believed his wife was on the plane.
She texted me that they were landing in 20 minutes. The rest of my text did not get delivered.
The Army says the Black Hawk helicopter involved was on a training flight with 3 service members on board.
Highly complex. It means very complicated and difficult to understand or deal with. I don't know about you, but I am not good at math. That looks like a highly complex math problem. Let's use highly complex in a sentence. The investigation into the crash is highly complex. Anytime you're dealing with a crash site and water, it has to be super confusing. It has to be highly complex. There you go. I told you we would talk about responders, and here they are. They are people who come to help when there's an emergency. First responders, you might hear that term too. First responders arrived quickly at the scene of the accident. And in the picture, it looks like there are firefighters, police officers, maybe some paramedics. Paramedics are like doctors who ride in an ambulance.
The conditions out there are extremely rough for the responders.
American Airlines says PSA operated Flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas was trying to land at the time. 64 people were on board. A man told a local CBS affiliate he believed his wife was on the plane.
She texted me that they were landing in 20 minutes. The rest of my text did not get delivered.
The Army says the Black Hawk helicopter involved was on a training flight with 3 service members on board. Multiple agencies are now investigating, with the National Transportation Safety Board taking the lead. Over the coming days, investigators will try to piece together the aircraft's final moments before the collision. Meanwhile, the search continues in the Potomac River, and as that's happening, all air traffic in and out of Reagan National has been halted for the next several hours.
Wichita, Kansas. It is like right in the middle of the country. Last week on this channel, I asked if anyone knew where Nebraska was. So many people did. I was surprised. Maybe you also know about Kansas. It's right next to Nebraska. But Wichita, Kansas is a city in the central United States where the flight began. Here is a close-up picture of Kansas. You can see other states like Missouri, Iowa, Colorado, and that state we talked about earlier, Nebraska. Let's read a sentence that has Wichita, Kansas in it. The flight took off from Wichita, Kansas, heading to Washington, D.C. They talked about service members on that Black Hawk helicopter. Service members are people who are part of the military. Sadly, 3 service members were on board the Black Hawk helicopter. It does appear that all 3 service members died. They use the term multiple. It just means more than one, several. Multiple agencies are involved in the investigation. Take a look at that picture. It looks like she might be from Afghanistan. There is an Afghani flag there, but it also looks like she has had multiple cups of coffee. I'm sure she has a lot of caffeine in her. I'm sure she is very caffeinated right about now. They talked about take the lead. Let's get the official definition for take the lead. Taking charge or being the most important in an effort. We have a meeting going on in this picture, and it looks like the man standing has taken the lead of the meeting. Halt. Do you know that verb? Halted means stopped or paused something. Paused means you stop it for a short period of time. All flights were halted for a short period of time at Reagan National Airport after the accident. We have more sad news out of the United States. There is another deadly plane crash. Earlier this week, we talked about a plane crash in Washington, D.C. that killed 67 people. Now we are talking about a plane crash in Philadelphia that has killed 6 people and injured at least 19 people on the ground. If this is your first time here, my name is Brent. I have been teaching English in the United States for over 20 years. And on this channel, we watch news clips together, and then I come back and teach all of the difficult terms, the English idioms, and those pesky English phrasal verbs. Before we get too far, because there could be some questions in the comments, I am wearing a hat right here. This is a flag of the state I live in, Maine. And earlier this week, I covered a story, a tragic story about what is going on in the Congo right now. And I have a sweatshirt with the Congolese flag on it. I am a big fan of flags. Let's get right into it. We will watch a news clip from CNN, and then I will come back and teach all of those difficult words.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip, and we begin with breaking news tonight. Another plane has crashed in another American city, and this time it is Philadelphia. I want to reset what we know at this hour. We are told a twin-engine Medevac jet took off from a local airport en route to Missouri. That plane reached 1,600 feet after takeoff before plunging 11,000 feet per minute.
And maybe the first thing we should talk about is where did this crash happen? It happened in the state of Pennsylvania. That might be hard to say, Pennsylvania. And it happened in a city we call Philadelphia. Philadelphia. And later on in this news clip, you will hear a man who has a strong Philadelphia accent. You will also hear a man that has a Ukrainian accent, but his English is great. For each of the terms, I will have a picture. I will have the official definition and I will use it in a sentence. Philadelphia is a large city in the state of Pennsylvania, USA. Here is the sentence. The Medevac jet, don't worry, we will talk about what a Medevac jet is. The Medevac jet crashed shortly after taking off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. Yes, the airport's name is Northeast Philadelphia Airport, and in that sentence, I used an English phrasal verb, taking off. We will talk more about that in just a minute. A little more about Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the country's 6th biggest city and is located in the state of Pennsylvania. Is that difficult to say? Pennsylvania. Before we get too far, if you are enjoying this English lesson, would you mind hitting that like button? It will tell YouTube to show it to other English learners. And if this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss another English lesson. Abby, the news reporter we see, she says that they need to reset. I really didn't have a great picture for this, so let's talk about the definition and the sentence. If you reset something, it means you start something over or return it to its original state. I think she did this because this news report was live. Just in case somebody was joining late, she wanted to reset the situation, like start over, so everyone would get the same information. Let's use it in a sentence. Abby wanted to reset the situation for anyone just joining the live newscast.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip, and we begin with breaking news tonight. Another plane has crashed in another American city, and this time it is Philadelphia. I want to reset what we know at this hour. We are told a twin-engine Medevac jet took off from a local airport en route to Missouri. That plane reached 1,600 feet after takeoff before plunging 11,000 feet per minute. 6 people were on board, including a child patient.
Medevac jet. We talked about it earlier, but let's get the official definition. A medical evacuation aircraft used to transport patients. So if you have an evacuation, it means you need to leave a place quickly. Medevac, that's where the word comes from. Medical and evacuation. The Medevac jet was carrying a young patient back to Mexico when it crashed. Yeah, and what makes this story even more tragic is that one of the 6 victims was a young child. Where I live, we don't have Medevac jets, but we do have life flights, and those are helicopters that can go pick up a person if they need medical attention really quickly. I have used this English phrasal verb. They use the English phrasal verb in the newscast, took off. It's the past tense of take off. Let's get the definition. It's when an aircraft, that is an airplane or a helicopter, leaves the ground and begins to fly. The plane took off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport en route to Missouri. We'll talk about en route and Missouri next. En route, it means on the way to a destination. A destination is a place where you want to be. The aircraft was en route to Missouri before heading to its final destination in Mexico. I had to change that green color. My eyes are not that great. It was hard for me to read. This should be better. Let's talk about the state of Missouri. You can see it on the map in the red. Let's get the definition. A state in the central United States. The flight plan included a stop in Missouri before continuing to Mexico. Mexico was the final destination of this Medevac jet.
That plane reached 1,600 feet after takeoff before plunging 11,000 feet per minute. 6 people were on board, including a child patient. Here is another look at the crash as it happened. You saw there the jet plummeting almost like a missile out of the sky before an explosion. It landed in a busy section of the city near a mall.
These next two words, plunging and plummeting, mean almost the same thing. Plunging, it means falling or moving downward quickly. Witnesses, we will talk about witnesses in a minute, but witnesses saw the plane plunging from the sky moments before the crash. Maybe with that sentence, you can figure out what witnesses are without ever hearing the word before. In English, we call that context. So maybe you don't know the word, but you know all of the other words around it. So you can figure out what that unknown word means. We just did plunging. Let's do plummeting. Dropping suddenly and steeply. Very sad to hear that a plane plummeted out of the sky. The aircraft was plummeting rapidly or quickly before it hit the ground.
You saw there the jet plummeting almost like a missile out of the sky before an explosion. It landed in a busy section of the city near a mall.
They mentioned a busy section of the city. I didn't know if you would know what that meant, so let's talk about it. A crowded or active area. The plane crashed into a busy section of Philadelphia near a shopping mall. It's really amazing that more people on the ground didn't get hurt. You can see from the footage of the crash, there is quite an explosion.
It's unknown whether there are any casualties on the ground. Here, though, is how one witness described the scene.
I was in shock. I'm still in shock. Like, this is insane. Why can this happen? And before that, to be honest, in my mind, I thought, like, what if the rocket would, because I'm from Ukraine, right? And there's war. There's always rockets coming in and stuff like that. And then I see, like, things flying. Like, no way, the war started again? You know, and you say, you never know.
Instead of saying people who were hurt, you might hear casualties. Casualties are people who are injured or killed in an accident. The crash resulted in multiple casualties, including those on board and those on the ground. By on board, they mean people who were on the plane. I told you we would talk about what a witness is. It is a person that sees an event happen. A witness described hearing a loud explosion as the plane crashed. So we just talked about the noun form of this word. Let's talk about the verb form. It's very close to the noun. Many people witnessed the plane crash, so it just means they saw it.
Like, this is insane. Why can this happen? And before that, to be honest, in my mind, I thought, like, what if the rocket would, because I'm from Ukraine, right? And there's war.
Insane. Native English speakers love to use this word. An insane situation is a situation that is extremely shocking or crazy. I can't imagine people at that mall seeing that crash. It must have been insane. The aftermath of the crash was an insane scene of destruction and chaos. We have talked about chaos in past English lessons. The man from Ukraine actually has some great English, and he uses a phrase that a lot of native English speakers say. To be honest, a phrase used to express that you really believe something. To be honest, I think you can learn English. You are doing a great job. To be honest, I never expected something like this to happen in our neighborhood. To be honest is so common, you might see the acronym TBH. If you are reading a text message from a native English speaker, you might see TBH. Now, they did not say this in the newscast, but I thought that man from Ukraine might be having a flashback. Let's talk about what a flashback is. It's a sudden, very clear memory of a past event. It's not always bad, but it usually is. The man from Ukraine may have been having a flashback to the war he witnessed. And that is very common for soldiers who have experienced war. When they get back home, maybe they hear a loud noise and it makes them think they are back in the war again. In the United States, around the 4th of July, a lot of Americans like to explode fireworks. That can be very triggering for people who have served in war. They might have flashbacks, thinking they were back on the warfield.
Here's the conversation also that we have now obtained from the air traffic control tower. Listen.
Medevac Med Service, Northeast Tower. Medevac Med Service 056, Northeast Tower. You on frequency? We have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened, so we're trying to figure it out.
Let's go straight to Philadelphia, where Councilman Mike Driscoll, who represents that area, is with us now. Councilman, thank you very much for joining us. I know this is a very active scene. There was just a briefing with other city officials, but I want to ask you directly about that plane, 6 people on it, according to the company.
Let's talk about the verb obtained. It means got or acquired something. CNN obtained video of the crash from the local police. Let's take a look at this picture. I don't know what is in that envelope, but maybe it's a college degree. The person in the picture might have obtained their college degree. Be careful when you use obtained. It's very official. You wouldn't obtain some milk from the store. We have a big term here, air traffic control tower. It's a facility at an airport that manages aircraft movements. The pilots did not talk with the air traffic control tower before the crash. Frequency. We have a couple different ways in English we use frequency, but in the newscast, they used it like this. A specific radio wave used for conversation. The plane lost contact on the designated radio frequency shortly after takeoff. The air traffic controllers, those are the people who work in those towers, they kept calling out to the people on the jet, but they never heard back from them. In the newscast, Abby, the reporter, talked to a council person. Let's talk about what a council person is. The member of a city council. So they have something to do with the government of the city, the government of Philadelphia. The local council person addressed the media about the incident.
Let's go straight to Philadelphia, where Councilman Mike Driscoll, who represents that area, is with us now. Councilman, thank you very much for joining us. I know this is a very active scene. There was just a briefing with other city officials, but I want to ask you directly about that plane, 6 people on it, according to the company. Do you believe that there are any survivors on that aircraft?
Well, Abby, I can't say for sure, but it doesn't look good. It's a sad situation we have here in Northeast Philadelphia. We were only celebrating a couple of days ago, our football team success, and now we have this tonight. And it looks like not only the people that won that plane and the person that needed medical help, uh, they seem to be people that were doing the Lord's work. And now we have our first responders out there in mass.
They talk about an active scene in the newscast. Let's define what that is. A location where emergency responders are currently working. If the scene is active, normal everyday people are not supposed to go there. You might even see crime tape stopping people from going to that active scene. The crash site remained an active scene as investigators examined the area.
We were only celebrating a couple of days ago, our football team success, and now we have this tonight, and now we have our first responders out there in mass. Our governor, our mayor, all doing all they can to not only the folks that were on that plane, but we are afraid there's more casualties on the ground. We don't know yet. It's going to take some time. We have to have some patience. We have to let our first responders do their job.
The man talked about some good news the city had just experienced. Their football team, the Philadelphia Eagles, made it to the biggest football game of the year. We call that football game the Super Bowl. That green helmet with the wings on it, that belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles. The red helmet, those are the Kansas City Chiefs. But the Philadelphia Eagles are a professional American football team based in Philadelphia. I don't think this has happened yet, but it might. Take a look at that sentence. The Philadelphia Eagles expressed condolences to the victims' families. If you express condolences, you say things like, "Oh, I am so sorry you lost a family member. I feel so bad." You are offering your condolences when you say things like that. They talked about something happening en masse. What does that mean? It just means in large numbers. People gathered en masse to pay their respects at the crash site. Now, at the time of this news report, it was still an active scene, so that probably hasn't happened yet, but I bet it will. Do you know the term folks? I know there is an L in it, but we pronounce it like folks. It's just an informal term for people. Many folks in the community are mourning the loss after the accident. And we talked about that spelling of mourning in a past English lesson. It means feeling sad after somebody died.
Abby, there's first responders vehicles moving in and out, whether they're taking them to the hospital or just responding to the homes or to the businesses or to the folks that were actually in the cars when that plane hit that sort of parking lot area. We suspect a lot will be going on as the evening progresses.
And in terms of the fire, our understanding is that the fire is being described as under control. But is there still fire burning? Are there still kind of active parts of this scene that are being dealt with from a fire perspective?
Absolutely. We have a wonderful fire department here. By the way, the first fire department in the United States of America. We have a highly trained first responder unit. And so, yeah, they're putting the fires out. But as you can imagine, there's those tinders that are always active that the first responders and the police have to make sure that they don't become a problem.
We need to talk about patience and patience. They said there was a child patient on that Medevac jet, and patients are people receiving medical treatment. The Medevac jet was transporting patients in need of urgent care. If something is urgent, it needs to be done right now. But this type of patience, they also use this type of patience in the newscast. It means the ability to wait calmly. Investigators asked for the public's patience as they conducted their work. I'm sure family members wanted information right away, but they had to be patient. You need a lot of patience to learn English because it takes a long time. You're still watching this English lesson? It's a long one. I hope it is working for you. Subsequent. This was another one I really couldn't find a good picture for, but let's get the definition. Coming after something else. Like, I'm sure on this channel, there will be subsequent English lessons. This is not the last English lesson on this channel. Subsequent reports that came after, provided more details about the crash. Yeah, in the coming days, we talked about that term a few English lessons ago. In the coming days, we will get even more information about this crash. Residential. You might hear a residential area. It just means where people live. Where businesses are, you might hear that called a commercial area. Let's get a sentence using residential. The plane crashed into a residential area, damaging several homes. But it also crashed near a mall, so it might have crashed near a commercial area too. Again, not a great picture for this, but they talked about facilities. Let's get the definition. Buildings or places that serve a specific purpose. Emergency facilities were set up to assist those affected by the crash.
We suspect a lot will be going on as the evening progresses.
And in terms of the fire, our understanding is that the fire is being described as under control. But is there still fire burning? Are there still kind of active parts of this scene that are being dealt with from a fire perspective?
Absolutely. We have a wonderful fire department here. By the way, the first fire department in the United States of America. You know, we have a highly trained first responder unit. And so, yeah, they're putting the fires out. But as you can imagine, there's those tinders that are always active that the first responders and the police have to make sure that they don't become a problem.
Oh boy. This one can be tough. Suspect. Notice how I pronounce it. Suspect. It means to believe or think something might be true. Investigators suspect that mechanical failure may have caused the crash. Mechanical failure means something in the jet stopped working. That's what they suspect. But a suspect can be a person. The suspect was caught in the bank robbery. A suspect is someone who might have committed a crime. Suspect is the verb, suspect is the noun. Don't you just love how easy English is? Totally kidding. English is pretty hard. I'm glad I learned English as a baby. America's first fire department. According to the guy being interviewed, that council person, he said the first one was in Philadelphia. I asked AI to produce a picture of the first fire department in the United States. It looks like it might be in Philadelphia. America's first fire department was in Philadelphia, and firefighters responded quickly to the crash. Or should I say, to the crash site. But in my research, I found that the first fire department that paid people to be firefighters was in Boston. They also talked about tinders in the newscast. Small materials like dry grass or wood used to start a fire. The plane crash ignited tinders in a nearby field, causing a small fire. If this is your first time here, my name is Brent and I teach English using the news. Most of the time we talk about news that is happening in the United States, but I thought let's change things up a little bit. Let's talk about something super scary, super sad that is happening in Africa. And the country I want to talk about today is the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. At least that's what we call it in English. Together, we will watch a news clip, and in that news clip, they will use some difficult terms, some English idioms, and of course, those pesky English phrasal verbs. And then I will come back and teach those difficult terms to you. We need to talk about how there are actually two countries with the word Congo in them. There is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and there is just the Republic of the Congo. Pretty confusing in English. We will also talk about Rwanda. We'll talk about this guy, Paul Kagame. How about this verb, fleeing, renewed, disembarked? We'll talk about these bad guys, M23. We'll talk about the Tutsis. We'll talk about the Hutus. Maybe we will review this term, but it is super important in English. Eventually. Insurgency. We'll talk about what it means to back somebody up. I'll explain the term, I got your back. We'll talk about this verb, denies, and so many more. So if you like improving your English and watching news at the same time, this is the perfect channel for you. Before we watch the clip, please don't forget to hit that like button. It will help other English learners find the lesson. And if this is your first time here, please go ahead and subscribe so you never miss another English lesson.
People fleeing renewed fighting in Democratic Republic of Congo disembarked from overcrowded boats in Goma on Wednesday, seeking refuge after M23 rebels seized a main supply route for the provincial capital.
For most of the terms, I will have a picture, I will have the official definition, and I will use that term in a sentence. In that picture over there, I have the flag of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That is pretty hard to say. So in English, we normally just say the DRC. And below, you can see the capital is Kinshasa. It is the second largest country in Africa. Do you know the first? And the population is over 100 million. There is that country in red on the map. The biggest country in Africa is one we are not going to talk about, but it's way up north, and it's called Algeria. At one time, the DRC was called Zaire, at least in English, and it was once a Belgian colony. A big language that is spoken in the DRC is French. But there's also the Republic of the Congo, no democratic in this name, and it's much smaller. The capital is Brazzaville. The population is about 5 million, and it was once a French colony, not Belgian. We also have to talk about the country of Rwanda. Let's look at the official definition. A country in East Africa located to the east of the DRC. There is a map of Rwanda. Maybe I should make it a little bigger because the country of Rwanda is pretty small. Let's use Rwanda in a sentence. Rwanda shares a border with the DRC where recent conflicts have occurred. You will hear this man's name in the news clip, Paul Kagame. He is currently the president of Rwanda, and he has been there since 2000, so about 25 years. In the United States, we can only have presidents for 8 years. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, is 25 years too long for someone to be president of a country? How about a sentence using Paul Kagame? Paul Kagame is the leader of Rwanda during the current tensions with the DRC. If you have tension with somebody, it means you are not getting along with them. You might be arguing a little bit. Well, a lot more than arguing is happening in the DRC right now, and we will talk about that in just a little bit. They use this verb, fleeing. Fleeing, it means running away from danger or a bad situation. Many people are fleeing their homes in the DRC due to the fighting.
People fleeing renewed fighting in Democratic Republic of Congo disembarked from overcrowded boats in Goma on Wednesday, seeking refuge after M23 rebels seized a main supply route for the provincial capital.
Renewed. When you see re at the beginning of a word in English, think again. The official definition means starting again after a pause. And if you pause something, it means you stop it for a short period of time. Let me reread that definition. Reread again. I will read it again. Starting again after a pause. That's what renewed means. And here is a sentence using renewed. There has been renewed fighting between the DRC Army and M23 rebels. We will talk more about those guys in M23 later. Not good people, I don't think. Let's use renewed in another sentence. Maybe this is how you feel. I have renewed my desire to learn how to speak English. Is that true for you? Maybe you took a pause in your English learning and you're ready to start learning again. Disembarked is the next one. Disembarked. That means get off a vehicle. Let's talk about what type of vehicle, like a boat, a train, or a plane. We don't say you disembarked from a car. That just doesn't sound right. Let's use it in a sentence. Refugees, we will talk about them a little later. Refugees disembarked from the overcrowded boats in Goma to escape the conflict. We'll talk more about overcrowded in just a minute. Goma is a city of 2 million people, and unfortunately, they are in a lot of trouble. Just to be clear, we would not say she disembarked from the car.
People fleeing renewed fighting in Democratic Republic of Congo disembarked from overcrowded boats in Goma on Wednesday, seeking refuge after M23 rebels seized a main supply route for the provincial capital. The Tutsi-led M23 rebel group took the eastern town of Minova, a local governor and a rebel leader said on Tuesday.
How about this one? Overcrowded. That picture? It looks like the city is pretty overcrowded. You know, crowd means like a group of people, right? Well, overcrowded means too many people in one place. Overcrowded camps have formed as people flee the violence in the DRC. Let's dive a little deeper on the city of Goma. It is in the eastern part of the DRC near the border with Rwanda. And guess what? There are a lot of natural resources there. Things that people use in their cell phones. So whoever controls this eastern part of the DRC could be very rich. Goma has been a focal point in the recent conflict involving M23 rebels. How about this sentence? Goma is a large city with over 2 million people. Refuge. Refuge is a safe place away from danger. A refugee is a person who is fleeing that danger. Many families sought refuge in neighboring countries due to the unrest. Let's use refugee in a sentence. A refugee is a person fleeing from a dangerous part of the world. I don't often express my opinion in these English lessons, but I will say these guys sound really bad. They do horrible things to civilians. Civilians are people not in the military. Let's get the official definition on who the M23 are. They are a rebel group. So that means they are fighting the army in the DRC, a rebel group in the DRC active in the eastern regions. The M23 group has been involved in recent battles in eastern DRC.
Seeking refuge after M23 rebels seized a main supply route for the provincial capital. The Tutsi-led M23 rebel group took the eastern town of Minova, a local governor and a rebel leader said on Tuesday.
Provincial. That's the next word. Provincial. In the United States, we have 50 states. It's like smaller pieces of land. I live pretty close to Canada. They don't have states in Canada. They have provinces. Pretty much the same thing as states, pretty much. Little different government, but pretty much the same. Provincial is related to a province, which is part of the country. Goma is the provincial capital of North Kivu in the DRC. And if we look at a map, it has all of the provinces of the DRC. It is written in French, but that red arrow is pointing to North Kivu. The DRC has 26 provinces. Canada has 10. Okay, we need to talk about these two groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis. The main reason I heard about the Hutus and the Tutsis was because of the Rwandan genocide that happened in 1994. For years and years and years, the Tutsis, they were the leaders of the country. The Hutus weren't treated as well, even though they were about 85% of the population. Tutsis were a lot smaller, like 10 to 12% of the population. You also have another group called the Twas. We can't forget about them. And when the Belgians ran the colony, they preferred the Tutsis. Well, in 1994 in Rwanda, the Hutus had enough and started attacking the smaller group of Tutsis. But we're not talking about Rwanda exactly, but a little bit. They might be backing this rebel group, which we will talk about in a little bit. But the Tutsis are an ethnic group mainly found in Rwanda and parts of the DRC. The M23 rebel group is primarily composed of Tutsi members. We talked about Paul Kagame earlier, the president of Rwanda. Guess what? He is a Tutsi. And Tutsis often fight with Hutus. Hutus, another ethnic group in Rwanda and the DRC. Historic tensions, it's like fighting, tensions, exist between the Hutu and the Tutsi communities in the region. In 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda. Maybe 1 million Tutsis were killed by the Hutus. And of course, the Twas were involved. They were killed quite a bit by the Hutus. And even some Hutus were killed if they were friendly with the Tutsis. So Hutus made up about 85% of the population of Rwanda, but the Tutsis were in charge of the government for decades.
The Tutsi-led M23 rebel group took the eastern town of Medevac, a local governor and a rebel leader said on Tuesday. The army has reported fighting on all fronts.
They talked about all fronts in the news clip. Let's get the official definition. In all areas or directions of a conflict. The army is fighting the rebels on all fronts. If you know anything about World War II, think about Germany. They were fighting war on two fronts. To the east, they were fighting the Russians mostly, and to the west, they were fighting like the Americans, the French, the British. In World War II, the United States was fighting a war on two fronts, one in Europe and one in the Pacific Ocean when they were fighting against Japan.
Hundreds of displaced people have made their way to Goma. Some recounted fleeing multiple times as the front lines shifted and walking for days without food or shelter.
I am very hungry. I left Medevac yesterday for Nzulo, but the situation in Nzulo is not good either. So now I'm heading somewhere, but I don't know where.
Displaced people. Individuals or people forced to leave their homes due to danger. The conflict has created thousands of displaced people seeking safety. Many of my students in my classroom are from the DRC. They were fleeing the DRC because things were dangerous. They now live in the United States. Shout out to any of my students from my classroom who are from the DRC. Recounted. Remember, means again. So recounted means told someone about something that happened. It doesn't have to be a secret like it is in the picture. Survivors recounted their experiences during the attacks. Like maybe they recounted their story to reporters.
Hundreds of displaced people have made their way to Goma. Some recounted fleeing multiple times as the front lines shifted and walking for days without food or shelter.
I am very hungry. I left Minova yesterday for Nzulo, but the situation in Nzulo is not good either. So now I'm heading somewhere, but I don't know where.
Government forces fought to secure Minova, but were eventually forced out, a civil society leader told Reuters. They said the rebels then tried to convince people to stay in the town after they started fleeing to more secure areas.
Eventually. This could be review. Native English speakers love to use the word eventually. It means after some time or like in the end. The fighting eventually reached the outskirts of Goma. Do you know outskirts? It's like the edge of the city. And in the picture, I do have a woman that I would say she looks a little bit older. So let's use eventually with that idea. Eventually, we will all grow old. Hopefully. Because if you don't grow old, something else happened. Like maybe you died before you were too old. So hopefully, eventually, we all get old. Convince. They use that in the news clip. Let's talk about that verb. It means to make someone believe something is true. Leaders are trying to convince the rebels to agree to a ceasefire. A ceasefire. That means fighting will stop. I used AI. I said, AI, create a picture for me of one friend trying to convince her other friends to go on a trip with her. So I imagine she is saying all good things about this trip. AI still can't spell. On the cover of the book, it looks like they spelled travel wrong.
This video from Minova shows a man said to be from M23 telling residents there that President Felix Tshisekedi has abandoned the Congolese people. The fall of Minova, located about 25 miles from Goma, raises concerns that the rebels may advance toward the major city. The M23 group has been waging a renewed insurgency in the Central African country's east since 2022. Congo and the United Nations accuse neighboring Rwanda of backing the group with its own troops and weapons. Rwanda denies this.
Felix Tshisekedi. I hope I am saying that correctly. Some of my students were trying to help me say his name. I'm not sure if I ever pronounced it correctly. I guess I should give a shout out to those students. Victor, Clarice, Meshach, Plemedy. Thank you so much for helping me. I'm not sure I did a great job. Felix Tshisekedi. He is the president of the DRC, and he has been president since 2019. Felix Tshisekedi is working to resolve or fix the conflict with the M23 rebels. Yeah, the M23 rebels are fighting against his army. Abandoned. Look at this school bus right here. It looks like nobody has used that school bus for a long time. It has been abandoned. Let's get the official definition. It means to leave a place or thing behind. Residents abandoned their homes due to the coming war. Very, very sad. The next one is insurgency. Let's talk about what insurgency means. Trying to take control of a government using violence. The M23's insurgency has destroyed parts of eastern DRC. In that picture, you will see the US Capitol building, and it looks like an insurgency is taking place. People involved in an insurgency are called insurgents. Let's talk a little bit about this, backing the group. What does that mean? It means supporting a certain group. Some people think that Rwanda is backing the M23 rebels. How might they be backing them? Well, look at the picture. Maybe with money or weapons. Maybe you talked to a family member and they said they are going to support you in your quest to learn English. Let's take a look at that sentence. If you want to start learning English, I'll back you up. It's another way to say I'll support you. And if you want to sound really like a native English speaker, you can say, hey, I got your back. Denies. Denies is a verb and it says that something is not true. Rwanda denies supporting the M23 rebels in the DRC. Or we could say this sentence. Rwanda denies backing the M23 rebels in the DRC. I'm not sure what these two people are talking about, but it looks like that woman is denying something. I don't know, maybe he said, you called me a bad name. And she said, no, I didn't. She is denying it. Okay, I thought this was a difficult one, but you made it to the end. Congratulations. If you are looking for more English, right down there is an English lesson I did about President Trump. There are a lot of President Trump English lessons on this channel. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.